Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron.
Hello. Selamat sore.
Sore.
Hey. Whoa. That was so loud. So I have never been to Indonesia. This is my first time. So it's kind of like I've looked at Jakarta on a map before and been like, this place looks crazy. It's big. There's lots of people who live here. I thought it was like the largest city in the world for a long time, but then I've looked at stuff and it's not. It's the metropolitan area is third after two Chinese cities. But I'd look down, on Google Maps years ago, like, oh, what's here, and looked at like the things to look at in Jakarta, those towers, what are they called? Those things. I was looking at those years ago. I was looking at those things and like, oh, this is interesting. And now I'm here. It's really awesome. So I know what Ajay and Sidhu from a while ago from the Indian Ruby conferences, and all they ever been talking about when I talked to them for the last year or so is Gojek. There's Gojek. It's all they ever talk about. It borders on obnoxiousness. So I was coming. I landed on the airplane. I got into the taxi. I started going, and right away I saw my thing isn't on actually. There we go. That cheese is a pointer. From now on, if you see a cheese, you know that I'm pointing at something. That is my first Gojek driver that I saw, and I was super. My taxi driver was like, "What's up with this dude? Why is he taking picture of Gojek drivers?" But yeah, I was super excited. Another first. Last night I had my first durian, and people say that it's you either hate it or you love it, but I kind of feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, and I think I need the actual fruit. This was like canned or something. It was like fake durian or something, but I need someone to give me just a big chunk of it, not on a bus because it's not allowed on buses, right? It's whatever. So when I got to my hotel room last night, there was a golf bag and a backpack. So if anyone here is missing a golf bag or a backpack, or if any of you wants one, you can come stop by the hotel room and I'll give it to you. It's super weird. You just get random stuff in your room. It's really sketchy. So I was at RubyConf Philippines with some people. That's me with the cheese, and then I was there with Nick, and there's Matt's. On this trip, we were here. I recorded this not the people but the dog for like 10 minutes. Because it was just chilling. It was like the chillest dog that I've ever. So there's the dog. Here it is again. This is seriously like 5 minutes later. It's just chilling. Has anyone else seen this before? I've never seen anything like this before. And there he is again. And I kind of have this like, I want to eventually, I've been hearing hati-hati a lot, which is like, kind of like, it's like chill out, right? It's kind of like, it's like slow down, sort of, or what is it? Is that a good, some be careful. Well, maybe it's a bad explanation. Sorry. Forget that. But I kind of want to be more like this dog. I want to be more chill. So this is what I'm searching for kind of in life right now. Another great thing that happened in the Philippines, my first time there, I got that's Matt's there, and we did burpees on stage together. I don't know if you're familiar with what a burpee is, but Koichi, where are you? There you are. Koichi. So I want to do another Ruby hero I want to do burpees on stage with, just real quick. It's a great exercise. If anyone else wants to come, you can do it. We'll just do one real quick. Sorry, this is like the Friday hug for me. So you go down like this, and then you go down on your hands and back. Push up, kick forward, and then you go up and you jump. Yeah. No, let's do it again. We're just doing one. Woo! Someone got a picture of that, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. So I had actually never seen this tweet before. When I was looking for this picture, I found the tweet, and there's caption this, and there's actually a couple of funny responses. This is we're about to start a scrum, and then. This kind of goes back to Koichi's talk, I think, a little bit with the concurrent squatting. Yeah, so this talk is how I learned Indonesian in 30 days, and so can you. Any of you? Selamat sore, I'll say it again. I'm living in Austria right now, but I'm not Austrian. I think that people think that I'm Austrian. I'm from the northwest of the United States. Whenever I tell anyone that I'm from Austria here, they think I'm saying Australia, which is really, I'm like, no, it's like there's a Germany and a Italy, and then they're just like, whatever, dude. So it gets boring really fast. So the abstract of my talk is not what my talk is actually going to be. If you read it, it said that I made a bunch of software to help me learn Indonesian. I actually didn't make any software to learn Indonesian. I just used this app. It's called Memrise. It's great if you want to learn a new language. It does a lot of mix of different kinds of things to help you kind of learn words in a better way. There's lots of other apps, but this is my favorite one so far, except sometimes there's some pretty sketchy pictures in it that users have uploaded, so you got to kind of be wary of that. But I'm also going with the default theme today for my talk. I went with the motorcycle theme because I think motorcycles are really cool. And also, Sidhu thinks motorcycles are really cool. If you've ever seen his Twitter feed, he loves motorcycles. I don't think he's here, is he? No, that's too bad. Yeah, so my background, I'll go over my background for just a second. I'm not a genius programmer. That's very, very far from what I am. I speak 4 languages. For someone, like hearing that from someone in the States, like when you're in the States, it's like amazing. When you go anywhere else in Europe or here, everyone can speak so many languages. But I can speak German and English and then like Spanish and Italian a little bit. I write 4 programming languages probably regularly. I'm a Elixir developer now, it turns out. It just magically happened. I'm, I guess, a full stack developer, or whatever that is. And so I have a project with cryptocurrency, and I'm working on a mobile wallet. Both are probably, I think, Elixir-related projects. I used to, not that long ago, I was a cook/chef, or whatever that is, so I used to cook stuff for a living. I ended up in Europe through cooking, actually, and I was a cheesemaker. I worked on farms in the Alps with a bunch of goats and all kinds of stuff, lots of goats. And the reason I tell you this isn't because I'm like, look at all the stuff that I've done. It's more, I've become pretty good at learning very, very efficiently. So from moving from one career completely to another one to software development, and then from learning different programming languages, different techniques, different patterns, I've kind of found a process that works really well for me for learning. And so this talk, instead of being about software that I built, is going to be kind of how I learn. I think this fits better with a closing keynote as well, kind of more I guess, touchy-feely than. I was going to do a talk about, like, we were going to build a programming language for the talk, but the last talk of a technical conference, I don't think that sounds like something that's super fun. Motorcycles are really cool. So I love books. So I use books to read generally. Most of the time I'm using books. I've been using screencasts more, but screencasts more for like specific things. For if I'm learning some kind of a framework or something, I will go to screencasts. But I have a technique for books. I generally buy a general book first. So something like the Pickaxe book, or maybe, I think, Efficient Ruby. I don't know if that's out of date. I think all the books that I've used for Ruby are completely out of date now. Beginning Ruby was really, really good, but I think it's very, very out of date. Does anyone know if there's like a second or anything edition on it? Great book. Peter Cooper, fantastic. So I will read a book, just a basic about whatever thing that I'm learning, and then I will go to a site like Code Wars. Code Wars is like a kata, like a coding challenge site, where the interface is great. It has, you enter in your code, you're starting to solve, you're proving tests, and you run your code, and like the different windows are done really well. It's got gamification involved. You can go against other people. There's different language support. So I first found it trying to actually do some Crystal in it, and so I was trying to learn Crystal a bit, and you can go by which programming language you're using and pick, there's like support for Ruby, Crystal, I think Elixir, Haskell, other things, JavaScript, lots of JavaScript. So yeah, I really super suggest that you check out Code Wars. It's helped me to kind of more get the idioms down. So the first time when I'm learning a programming language or a new thing, I find that the hardest thing for me to do is just write basic things like for loops or where do brackets go, or maybe like with Go, the colon equals and things like that, where it's just, there's weird things you kind of have to get the hang of, like how to define a function. And this helps me with that. This is just because it's not like I'm not deep in a project, I'm just hitting at the sides and I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable, and it kind of gets me used to it. It becomes more muscle memory. It also helps me find out kind of the things that I thought that I learned in the book that I read or whatever resource I was using before, the things that I actually didn't learn. So I think that I know how to write the language, and then I find out, oh, I actually don't know any of this stuff. And so this first step really works well. After that, I will get a more specific book. So in this case, like with Ruby, I would recommend something like Metaprogramming Ruby. This is a really great book. It's not as much about metaprogramming as it is about kind of just how Ruby works, how a lot of how like class lookup goes, and like eigenclasses, like things that you may not know about that just you can use, and that when you're calling a method, what is actually happening, and like what is basic object, what's object, and those kinds of things. It's a really good like intro into the actual like the runtime, the Ruby runtime. But it also does some great stuff about metaprogramming in it. Then I will, after that specific book, I'll build something. So I have a set of projects that I generally will try and build in a new thing. I have one thing that's like a Twitter aggregator for people tweeting about meat. And then I have another thing that's like a brewery finder that I generally look for. But I pick something easy, and then I need it to be difficult enough. Like I generally do a lot of API calls to things, so I want it to be able to do API calls. Maybe it connects to Foursquare or Google Maps API or something like that. This is something that I built at a hackathon. It's called Chat Attack, but normally I could maybe from here. Chat Attack is how you're supposed to say it. I kind of got a little feedback, but it's a chatting chatbot. It's a chatbot that you talk to it, and then it takes the message or image or whatever you sent to it, and it sends it to a random person who has ever chatted with a chatbot before. And then when they respond, their message goes to a random person, and it like, in a small group, it was really awesome. It was just us sending messages back and forth and like being surprised every time. We would receive balloons sometimes, but it was really fun. But now, since there's like a wider user base, and it's lots of people I think have just like shut the bot up, so the messages go into the void. It's not really fun anymore, and I can't think of a good use case. If anyone can come up to me later with a good use case, I would be very happy. Okay, those are there, cool. So, great. You read your books, you're learning stuff, fantastic. So another thing that I think that more relates back to this, me learning Indonesian, is improving your memory. So improving your memory can really help you to learn new things, learn small concepts. In case you're trying to find something, you don't always need to go to the documentation, you have it in your head. And there's some techniques that I have that I've learned. I've read some books about getting a better memory, and they all have pretty similar sorts of things that they talk about. So you'll see that guy again. He's just he's a good guy. So one of them, like a lot of them are pretty strange. So this one is what you do is you take the things that you're trying to remember. So this works really well with lists. So I have a list of things I want to remember. I take parts of a car and I visualize the thing in a weird way, and then I put that thing on a part of the car. So I put something on the bumper, I put something in the driver's seat, I put something on the steering wheel, and if it's a list, I try and relate the thing and then move it around the car and put it, and then you have this like weird tie to visualizing something on a thing. You can do it with rooms in a house, like this is by the fridge. So what we're going to do is we're going to memorize the Agile Manifesto. It's one of the better manifestos, and it was, I don't know, the 90s or something? Who knows when this was? 90s? Something like that. Way before most of our time, huh? That some people made these, they came up with some ideas of what Agile means, and they wrote it down. That's You've probably seen some of these people before on Twitter or read their books. Instead of using a car, we're going to use Jakarta traffic because I think it's probably wild here. So the first one is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So I'm actually going to take a step back. So we're going to memorize this, okay? And if in an hour, so let me see what time it is real quick. It is our clock? Okay, so it is 5:14. So it's 6:14. If you can come to me and tell me the entire list, you will get one of these wonderful treats from Austria. It's wonderful wafer cookies. They're utterly delicious. They're vegan too. So yeah. So let's try and memorize this. So the first one is the individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So I'm going to think of an individual person. I'm going to think of Mats, and I'm going to put Mats on the blue and red bus down here. So he's an individual. He's down on the red bus, blue bus. I don't know. So the next one is working software over comprehensive documentation. So kind of like Ruby is supposed to be self-documenting. Let's try and go with that. We don't need pages and pages and pages of documentation. So we have this horrible pile of documentation on the other red bus. So I probably should have picked things a little bit more contrasting than red buses. So customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Here's our happy customers. They're very satisfied. And we're going to put them on the blue bus. There's a blue bus too. So we have our customers. Responding to change over following a plan. You can see that I have memorized the things. So responding to change. So I'm going to do a play on words. This is change, and we're going to put it on the trees this time. We don't. Okay. So we got the individuals, customers, interactions, the code, working code over documentation, and the change, reacting to change. So in an hour, if you remember it, you get some wafers. If I remember it, I should probably try and remember it too. So here's another memory technique that is, it's very similar to the last one. It's trying to think of the thing, come up with some kind of a word that you can make a visualization for, and then connecting those two in your head. So I use this a lot for learning Indonesian. I don't know if are people familiar with Botox here? Yes? Okay, cool. So Botox is this thing. It gets rid of your keriput, and you get it injected. So let's try and use Botox to help me. Those are some teeth. So there we go. Botox. Okay. So let's get that picture off. So is everyone familiar with the John Rambo? All right, cool. So there's Rambo. He's one thing I love about Rambo is his beautiful hair. There we go. So I actually, this is what I use to remember the words. So this is not just like, it works pretty well. So let's use this now for Ruby Standard Library. If you're not familiar with the enumerable module, you should be. It's great. Anytime you have a list of anything and you want to do stuff to it, it's really, really wonderful. But the problem with it is that it's 55 functions. So it's not that easy to remember. I find that I'm doing something and then I see enumerable later. I'm like, oh, that's part of the standard library, that thing that I re-implemented. So we're going to try and remember a couple of these functions. Here is each slice. Each slice takes a list, or it is a list, and then it takes what? It takes a number, and then it gives you little slices in that number, with that number of items in it. You can see on the thing. I didn't describe that very well. So each slice, got a slice of pizza, another slice of pizza, another slice of pizza. So I don't think that you will ever forget that each slice exists again. So here's another one, inject. Inject, I'm more of a fan of its alias reduce because I think it describes it better. You have a list on one side, you give it a starting value, which can be any kind of value, a number, a list, a hash. And when you run the block, you get as arguments the thing that you started with, and then an item from the list, and then what you return from that becomes the next thing that you start with. So it's just a classic reduce. I described that really well too. So if we're going to try and remember inject, there we go. So anytime you see that function, now you're going to think of this. That's what you get. That's what we're going to go home with. So on doing my research, I think I was looking for other people's bald heads for this picture. And I ended up finding a lot of really weird head tattoos on bald people. It seems to be like a trend. Maybe I should get on that trend. Here's one that's like a sardine can, but it's a brain. Here's a bowling ball, which is cute, which is kind of insulting to the bald. This is just, I don't know what's happening here. Yeah. And then this is nightmare material right here. I see this thing sometimes. And the worst of all, actually, is bald exploitation. So this is a logo. A company gives you a logo and pays you to wear it around on your bald head. Which really reminds me of, I don't know if you heard in the Netherlands, they were doing this with sheep, that they made sheep ads. And they would just stand, the sheep were always by the highway so they could see them. And I don't want to be their sheep. This is really obnoxious. So another technique to get better, to learn faster, is to read other people's source code. What's happening here? Yeah, so I read source code quite often. And I find that it's better than reading documentation most of the time with Ruby. I learned from, with Ruby specifically, with Go it's harder for some reason. I have a really hard time reading Go code. But with Ruby, I can generally faster find whatever I'm trying to learn or whatever problem, whatever's broken, if I just open up the source code for the gem or whatever I'm using. It also teaches me, I can see more of, sometimes I don't know, the documentation is not complete, and I don't know the full API that is accessible to me. I'm not even talking about private methods, I even mean just the public methods. And it's, the source code is more current than the documentation pretty much always, because it's the actual code that's running, except in cases where it's not, and you have a gem available that's not on the master branch or whatever's happening, what you're looking at. So this guy's back. I don't know what I was looking for. I think I was looking for hacker, and I found this guy. Lots of pictures of him. I don't know where he's loving the computer. And then it starts to kind of get dark. He pulls out the guns, and then it just goes downhill from there. Another technique to use, if you're not familiar with it, is Bundler has a command called bundle open. And bundle open will open up whatever gem you have in your gem file that you call after it in whatever default editor you're using. So you call bundle open, and then, for example, if you want to read Pundit's source code, you would type Pundit, or you would type devise. For example, I often have to do this with devise to find out what kind of the default controllers are and the ways that they're calling it, the resource method and stuff. Or if you want to look at the default templates, you can just bundle open devise. Or if you are crazy, and I don't recommend this at all, but you could bundle open active record, which works. So we're actually going to do that. We're going to bundle. Is it started? There we go. So we're going to bundle open active record. This is what it looks like. I have some kind of a warning that you're in it. This is Vim. Vim's my default editor, so it's fast. And then you go down, and then you just open your files. And what's crazy about it, kind of evil about it, is you can actually change that, and then when you restart whatever app you're working on, you get your new changes. So that's useful. You can even do pry bind inside of it, or binding.pry. So if you need a pry session inside of one of the gems that you rely on, it's pretty awesome. So another thing that I recommend is making aliases to all of these things in your whatever shell you're using. I have all of these in mine, and then you can see that's on line 316, and then there's probably another 200 lines. I alias everything because I hate typing stuff, but BO space whatever is really, really nice. And so is BE. BE is really, really nice. Do we have to use bundle exec anymore? I don't even know. Does anyone know? No one knows? No one knows. Okay, cool. I'm not the only one who doesn't know. So another thing that you can do is just kind of browse GitHub. GitHub has a pretty cool feature that you can type T, and then you get a fuzzy search that you can just go to whatever you want to go to, just straight up in GitHub. So I go to Explore often. You can see it up in the upper right-hand corner, Explore, kind of upper right-hand corner. And then I look for what's trending and whatever language that I'm trying to learn, or I'll search for something. If I have to learn React and Redux, I will do some awful search for that. And then just read other people's code and see how they're using it and see what kind of things they're doing. Another thing to do that's great from GitHub is just to download it. Here is Visual Studio, or VS Code, whatever it's called, trying to hide the name. It's a pretty cool editor, actually, it turns out, even though it's from those guys. And if you command and then click on anything, then you end up in whatever spot that is. So if you need to follow up the line, you probably are using an IDE already, so you're like, you're stupid, dude, like whatever, I've been doing this for 100 years. But the tooling is good, you can just follow up the stuff, words. So another thing that you can do to learn kind of Ruby or programming or new programming languages better is to write your own programming language. It's actually simpler than it seems to do something simple. First off, I want to say thank you to our wonderful leader. He's so cute in this picture. Like this, I feel like this is like what the first things you find when you look for him. This I don't even have anything to say about this one. I'm just a sweet dude. Okay, so programming languages are generally built fairly, at least dynamic languages, in a similar way. There's text that goes in, just whatever text you have. It goes into a lexer. A lexer takes your text and it splits it up into different tokens. Your tokens are then fed into a parser. The parser creates an abstract syntax tree, which is just like a kind of tree which describes how these things interact. If you have an if statement, then the condition and the block need to somehow be related to that. And then you have a runtime, which is, it's kind of like if you look at object and basic object and these things in Ruby, it's the things that wrap around, the things that live in memory when your program is running. So kind of the structure of the programming language. And then the interpreter will take your parsed abstract syntax tree and then kind of inject it into your runtime and actually run your program. So there's a pretty cool Ruby tool called Ruby Language Toolkit. There's also an RLTK that's the roguelike toolkit, which is probably also cool, but you might find it. Just skip that guy. And you can use this to build your own programming language using Ruby. So we're going to build a calculator. It's not really a programming language. It's just a calculator, but it can kind of show you a little bit of how these parts actually work together. But I think calculators are boring, so we're going to make a cool calculator. And first, what we need our lexer. So all of these things, these lexers, these parsers, they pretty much are created to make these abstractions easier for us to understand. A lexer, you don't really need a lexer. You can just create a loop that goes character by character or word by word or symbol by symbol. And that's what a lot of people do. I'm sure that's what happens with Ruby because lexers are kind of slow at a certain point. But if you want to look at a file and understand kind of what your language looks like, it's a really, really nice abstraction to have. And if you're starting out, if it's your first time, it's your first 5 times, like it's a really, really great tool to use. So let's talk about what's actually happening here. We have, we're just using RLTK lexer. We're subclassing it. And then we create these rules which describe the symbols that should fall out of our text that we just fed it. Here we have a rule, a regular expression that matches something. So the first one is matching just a plus. And then in the block, we return what symbol that should be. So if you're not familiar with regular expressions or you're afraid of them, you should really check out this book and just read like the first 3 chapters of it. That's as far as I got. And it really, like, I was afraid of regular expressions, and now I feel like at maybe not expert level, but slightly below expert level. Like I can read most regular expressions and understand exactly what's going on. It's like, seriously, it's not very much, and you will, if you've been afraid before, it will alleviate that fear. So we are matching these symbols. We're returning some kind of a token. You can see that second from the, let's see if this thing, we have, this is matching the numbers 0 through 9, and the plus means 1 or more. So like this would match 9 or 999 or 44. And then what this is if you're actually matching something, it also, in the block, you can receive the thing that you matched. So this would match the string of numbers. And then we're returning a token with a value. And this last rule is saying just skip all other empty space. So we don't care about empty space. So this, we're going to run our Lexer right now that we just built. Coolculator lexer.lex. And we're going to do 2 plus 2 just to see if we can figure out what 2 plus 2 looks like. So it returns you a bunch of objects. And these objects are the tokens as objects. They have a type, which is the token that you told to return, and then they have a value if you returned a value. So for all of the numbers, we will have values. For the other thing, for the pluses and those things, it'll be nil. So let's see how long I take to start typing this time. It's probably going to take 100. There we go. Come on, type, Aaron. So if you don't know this also, this is a cool trick with pry. If you use an underscore, it says use the last thing that was sent to pry. So I'm just mapping out the token type and the token value, and you'll be able to see that we have numbers with nils, or numbers with the value, and then the plus with a nil. So this is our tokens for our program. EOS means that's just the end of the file. So this is what we got. Yep, that's our symbols, great. So now we actually have to parse them. Oh, they're cool too. I forgot they were cool. So here's our parser. I'm just doing this guy. So when we write a parser, we're trying to take our tokens and match structures kind of inside of our tokens. So we have these ideas of like something equals something is an expression, or something plus something, or we can wrap something in parentheses, and all of these are ideas of expressions. They all return some sort of value. The first things at the top, this left and right, is just saying if it's a multiplication, it's more important than an addition, so you should do that first. And then we're creating this production, and a production is something that you're going to match against. Maybe that'll make more sense in a second. So E will stand for expression. If in our clauses we're trying to match a combination of symbols and expressions and other productions, here we just have one production, we're keeping it simple. You can see that if it's a number, if the symbol that we returned is a number, then we're just going to return that number. The n is the value that was attached to the number. So great, that's our E there. The next one says if there's a left parentheses and a right parentheses and an expression, then we're going to return the expression. The next one is the plus, and you can see that all of these are recursive and like self-referential. So this E here could be this. So it could be E plus E, or it could be like 4 plus 4 inside of parentheses, which would be itself an expression. So if you had like a 4 plus 6 times parentheses around 4 plus 2, parentheses, all those kinds of things, in the end, you would end up with a bunch of these self-referential things. So we're going to show just it working, just to prove to you that it's a thing. So we're doing 2 plus 2 times 2, and then that was our Lexer, and then we're going to do this. We're going to actually parse it. And normally parsing would give you an abstract syntax tree, but in our case it's not. We just have a calculator, so it returns the actual value that comes out the other end. So that worked. Here is the parser in Ruby, in the actual Ruby programming language. You can see that this is describing the tokens. This is like similar to what we did in the Lexer, or no, in the parser in the beginning. This is just saying like these are the tokens that are available. These are the things that whatever you're lexing will send out at the end. And then here is deeper down in the parser. This is more like this op would be a production in our case, and it's saying if it's If it's a pipe, then return this ripper pipe. If it's a greater than, return this ripper greater than. So it's very similar. It's using something called Bison that was actually written by the Eric Schmidt from Google. But it's a parsing tool that this is in C instead of being in Ruby. So I definitely start with Ruby. And if you want to look at Ruby's parser, you can find it here. Just Ruby blob trunk parse.y. We're not going to talk about the runtime. I already kind of described it. It's just when you need an environment for your code to run, you build it so you can access things like the basic object. You can add methods to it, kernel, having plus available everywhere, creating your standard library. That's where your runtime will live. And then your interpreter is the part that takes your parsed abstract syntax tree and then converts it into something that your runtime can use. So I highly recommend this book. It's what Jeremy Ashkenas used to build CoffeeScript. And I have it. I read it, most of it, until it gets to the bytecode parts. Then I'm just like, but in the whole beginning, he's using different tools than RLTK. So it'll give you kind of more of an idea. He kind of shows you about different tools. It's really straightforward. He builds a programming language called Awesome that looks like kind of Ruby and Python mixed together. And so you can see kind of, he writes his own parser, his own lexer also, just by stepping through the code. So you have access to seeing that. This is called Make a Lisp. It's a library, or it's a GitHub repository where people in different languages have created, I think it might be Common Lisp, an interpreter for Lisp. And you can see how a standard library might be built. You can see how they actually build their parsers and their lexers from scratch, so you can see how that works. And you can look at it in different programming languages. So say you want to learn Elixir. I think that they have Elixir as one of the languages. I'm pretty positive they do. Yeah.
So,
if you're learning new things a lot, especially often, you're going to kind of constantly always feel uncomfortable. When I first got my first kind of real cooking job, my first professional cooking job, for like 6 months, I was completely underqualified for my job, and everyone kind of made me feel like an idiot every day. But it was worth it, because the next job that I had, I learned really important skills there that I brought to my next job, where again, I felt like an idiot the whole time, which I brought to my next job. And it turned out that I learned how to cook professionally in really nice kitchens really, really quickly, but I hated everything for part of the time. So I don't know what to say about that. You'll be constantly frustrated because you already know how to do Ruby. And do you remember learning, if you've learned a musical instrument, for example, it's awful at first. It's a horrible experience. Your fingers don't work. With Ruby, you just if I want to pick up a new technology now, I'm like, why am I not using this thing that I already know? But I just force myself, and I end up eventually learning it, and then it's not frustrating anymore. And again, you will feel stupid because you already know things, and these things you don't know, and you'll feel stupid. Again, you'll remember how that felt before. Just like if you've tried to learn another spoken language recently, yeah. So that's all I got. Yeah, I hope to come back. I want to try the durian and some other things. And this is a project that I just released, a side project. It's the Ruby News bot. It's kind of broken because it was like a rush to release it, because I don't have any time to do side projects. But if you want Ruby news every day, and it's not filtered very well, so sometimes you'll get the same news almost. But it's really weird. I find really weird stuff on it. It's just has a mind of its own now, and it's finding really strange Ruby news. So yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thank you.